Welcome to episode 70 of the Princeton Podcast, sponsored by the Municipality of Princeton, encouraging civic participation and amplifying the voices that shape our community. In this episode, Mayor Mark Freda sits down with Kevin Wilkes, founder and managing partner at Princeton Design Guild, for an in-depth discussion about his community service and architectural contributions. Kevin shares his experiences in local governance, including his tenure on the Borough Council from 2008 to 2013, and discusses his involvement with Princeton Future, a citizen advocacy group focused on town planning and the successful preservation of the public library downtown. Kevin delves into his architectural work, including the significant renovation of the former post office into Triumph Brewery, and shares his passion project, the restoration of Paul Robeson's birthplace, into a community center. And finally, Kevin talks about his architectural firm, Princeton Design Guild, its evolution, and its upcoming projects, including a new building for the YWCA. So without any further introduction, let's join our host, Mark Freda, and his guest, Kevin Wilkes, for episode 70 of the Princeton Podcast.
Kevin, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Mark.
Yep, it's my pleasure. Hey, so what I'd like to do first is look at some of your community service. You know, you used to be on the Princeton Borough Council at one point, right?
Yes, when we had a borough.
Yep.
I was on the terminal years of the Borough Council from 2008 till 2012, 13, when the consolidation vote took place. I was honored to be on the ticket with President Obama in 2008 as my first run for office.
Wow, there you go. How cool. What does an elected official do? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was lucky, I thought, at that time in the borough. We had a very strong staff with Bob Brusheye and engineers and zoning officer Derek and Chris Budzinski. And we actually did things to solve problems for issues in the borough. We worked on traffic and parking issues, which were a constant problem in the borough.
Yeah.
We worked on emergency services problems. We had 3 volunteer departments back then, and there were many issues in trying to navigate their needs and requirements as the community grew and became more complex. The biggest issue was the relationship with the university. And I felt very strongly at the time that the university needed to assist the community in many ways as possible, given that the growth of Princeton, I largely attribute to the growth of Princeton University. And it was very rewarding for me to serve in the borough. I regret that as a child, as a young person during the Vietnam War era, I did not serve military service, but it wasn't particularly appealing to go to the Vietnam War. So I look at my 5 years on Borough Council as a corollary surrogate service to the community that I did not do as a young person in the military.
Yeah. I think serving as an elected official, and I don't use the word politician because to me a politician is one thing and an elected official is something else. But I think being an elected official at the local level, if your heart's in the right place and you're doing it for the right reasons, it's one of the best things ever to do for anybody.
It was very rewarding. I was poor as a politician. I constantly battled with 2 of my colleagues on council over issues. And I was probably unyielding at times when if I'd been a better politician, I would have just let it roll off my back. But I felt determined to solve problems correctly, whether it be the reconstruction of Harrison Street Park or whether it be the issue of the relocation of the Dinky farther away from the center of town, to which I was opposed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I could do a whole podcast on the Dinky, but okay. Another group you've been involved in is Princeton Future. So what is that group? What's the goal? What happens there?
Princeton Future is a group that I got involved with maybe 10 years before I ran for council. It's a citizen advocacy group for planning improvements for the, at that point, combined communities of Princeton Township and Princeton Borough. There was a very controversial project in the late 1990s, early 2000s about the relocation or reconstruction of the public library downtown. And there were strong lobbying forces in the community from the mayor of Princeton Township that the library moved to Princeton Shopping Center. Yeah. And there were equally strong forces in Princeton Borough that the library stay exactly where it was. The initial design for relocating the library was not a terribly advanced piece of civic public space making. It sort of replaced the library where it was. And at that point, what's now Heinz Plaza was a surface parking lot. Yep. And it actually, they imagined they were going to try to solve two problems at once and build the community parking garage, which the town had fought for 20 years. It was an impossible mountain to climb to create a municipal garage for this community. And they were going to put it right there on top of the surface parking lot, which seems somehow logical to replace parking with parking. But it really didn't advance the community design. So a man named Robert Geddes, my dean at Princeton School of Architecture when I studied there, and Sheldon Sturgis and Robert Goheen, a former president of Princeton University, the three of them banded together and created a citizens advocacy group called Princeton Future, specifically to lobby Borough Council and Marvin Reed, the mayor at the time, to change the proposed design to both keep the library downtown, but move the parking garage farther to the east and create a plaza as a public space, as a significant public space that somehow replicated the success of Palmer Square at a different portion of the community. After the success of that, they won. And it was quite a battle. And after the success of that, the group felt emboldened, and Princeton University actually participated with Princeton Future to look at other areas of the town that could be subject to planning improvements. Realize, as I'm sure you do, the planning departments of Princeton Borough and Princeton Township are not civic planning design organizations. They were the departments to which you submit your application, and they review the application and go over a checklist and say, yeah, everything's here, let's move forward. What the town lacked was some vision to what the town could look like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. To anyone who walks in Heinz Plaza and enjoys Christine's or Witherspoon Grill or the library, I want you to realize, had it not been for this group, you would have been standing on the first floor of a parking garage.
You got a good memory. So, yeah, that's interesting. So I want to bounce to another thing. You know, you've done so many things. It's really cool looking at your resume and seeing all that you've been involved in. But you led the charrette for what became 400 Witherspoon Street, which became at that time the Princeton Township Municipal Building. And this is back in, I think, 1997. So that must have been another interesting process. Can you share a little bit about that?
It was actually my first arm wrestle with elected officials trying to convince them to do the right thing. And I had colleagues with me, a landscape architect friend of mine, Alan Goodhart. At that time, I had worked for Princeton Township as the building inspector from 1991 to 1994. So I knew the municipal staff, and I knew the mayor, Phyllis, and the administrator, Jim. And we were housed in the old school at the corner of Witherspoon and Valley, and the Valley Road School, to all of you who grew up here in town, some of you still with us attended. And that was our municipal buildings. And I had 3 cups on my desk in the building department. One was for my coffee, and the other 2 were to collect the drips from the leaks from the roof that came through onto my desk. Yeah. And time and again, people said, oh, we need to do something about the municipal building. And the elected officials finally sort of screwed up the courage to burden the community with a significant bond issue to build a new municipal building. Many people felt it was not necessary. We could just stay in the school. And they hired the firm that had just done the new municipal building at Ewing. And the elected officials, for understandable reason, thought, well, this firm does municipal buildings. Well, let's hire them. Well, they did a terrible job. I urge anyone to go to the municipal building in Ewing now and thank the Lord that those people didn't build our municipal building, because it's a mess. It was a mess then. It's much more of a mess now. So we tried to convince the elected officials and finally succeeded. I said, why? We have so many great architects and designers in this community. Princeton is the center of the state's architectural design community, which is extraordinary for a 30,000 population town. You'd think, why isn't it Newark, or why isn't it Trenton or New Brunswick? But actually, the core of architecture participants in the state are right here in town. A little bit to do with the architecture school, a little bit to do with such a wonderful community to live in, and architects gravitate towards wonderful communities to live in. So I said, look, let's have a local competition and have people draw their own conclusions. And that's how we entitled the charrette, Draw Your Own Conclusions. And I convinced them to put up prize money. We hired jurors who were professors at East Coast architecture schools. And I must say, Michelle Tuck-Ponder and Steve Fracht and Ross Denard and Phyllis stuck their necks out because they'd already paid this firm to design this building. And here was, let's start over. But the process turned out great. We got wonderful designs. The winning design was by Kurt Shatkin and Sharon KSS, who actually happened to practice right across the street from the site. Second place finishers were Richards and Smith Architects, the people who've been responsible for the new Triumph and the post office and Macabre Books. And really, local talent rose up and showed what great skills and strength they had in this competition. And we ended up with a beautiful building that to this day is a treasure to walk into. The staff loves working here. People like coming here. And there's ample space to grow and expand. And even, although we couldn't anticipate consolidation, it proved to be the building that was needed to use for the consolidated municipalities.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so let me switch gears here a little bit. I believe you created Princeton Design Guild, or PDG, as some people call it, in around 1985. Big anniversary coming up, I guess. So tell us a little bit about that side of your life.
I graduated from Princeton Architecture School in 1983. I did my apprenticeship with an extraordinary solar architect in town, a man named Doug Kelbaugh. The firm was Kelbaugh & Lee. So when you start out as a young architect, you have to work under a licensed architect to learn the things they don't teach you in architecture school, which are myriad, all the business principles, a lot of this detailing of how to put things together. Architecture schools teach you high-level theory, history, ideology, principles. Working in an architect's office, you learn all the little detail things. Well, as soon as I completed that, 2 years later, I wanted to found my own firm because I always knew I wanted to build my own work. Now, I grew up in Manhattan, and I came to Princeton to go to college. And I knew all along I couldn't really build my own work in Manhattan. It's just an impossible mountain to climb. But when I got out here and I saw the Princeton community was starting to change, it was sort of the beginning of Princeton's escalation from a interesting historic town to a sort of amped up real estate value increasing, international people moving into university, growing significantly kind of town, which meant there were tons of opportunities for residential construction. And the first big building boom was 86, 87. So I founded my firm right at the beginning of that. As all the established builders in town immediately became new home builders, the renovation market was left wide open. And so I entered in 1985 doing design build work, doing kitchens. My first clients were Marcia and Elliot Freeman on Hemlock Circle. I did their kitchen in 1984. She still loves it to this very day, 40 years later.
That's great. So what's the focus of PDG now? Do you have something?
Well, we've grown in the 40 years, and we now do much more than just residential work. That was our bread and butter for 20, 25 years. But because of my experience through the various things, as you've mentioned, I've been involved in, I've gained a lot more insight into commercial projects, into university-related projects. So we actually have a foot in virtually all worlds now. We do commercial work in downtown. I do custom woodworking for Princeton University. I build replica doors for their historic Gothic doors. We build those in our shop. I still do new homes, and we we basically use our skills. We have 20 employees. There are 4 of us on the professional design staff. The other 16 are crafts people who make things. So we're fundamentally committed to making the things that we and some others design, those who want high quality work. And right now we just look for the most interesting project that's intellectually challenging to keep our staff at the cutting edge of making beautiful things.
Well, that sounds great. Okay, so I got to jump to this one. I think a lot of people, they must be aware that you were very involved in the renovation of the former post office on Palmer Square into Triumph Princeton. That seemed to have been a pretty complex project. Can you share a little bit about that one?
It was the single most complicated thing we've ever done. I had 2 hats. I was hired by the owner, Adam Rechnitz, a wonderful man. He owns the Triumph Brewery enterprise. He envisioned the Triumph Brewery enterprise, created it on Nassau Street, I think in 1996. And that spot that was the old bowling alley. Yeah. And so he sort of invented, along with his partner at the time, Ray Dish, this notion of brewing, selling beer on site. They actually lobbied the state legislature to change the laws. So they've grown and created new spaces. And he really wanted to create a signature project that would, would speak as highly of his enterprise as possible. So the first thing he did was hire me to be his representative to manage the job. He lives in a town an hour and a half away, so he's not here all the time. And his managing staff, they know how to make beer and create a restaurant. They don't know anything about building buildings. So my first entree was to represent him in the hiring of everyone, from the architects to the builders to the, to make it happen. And then I asked him when he interviewed me, I said, well, listen, it could be a little conflict of interest, but I would like to be eligible for the millwork side of the project, to do the woodworking, the restoration work in the old lobby and the new bars and work. And I said, you don't have to, promise it to me, but just give me a crack at it. And he said, okay, sure. So it turned out I did get that. So I was on the front end wearing kind of the owner's ball cap, and on the back end putting all the final details in right as we were opening the project. The interesting thing there is we had 4 architects on that job. That's how complex it was. It was too complicated for one architect, but the specialty needs were of an architect to do historic preservation. The federal government required, when they sold it, when Adam acquired the deed, that the entire exterior be restored and that the old lobby and the mural be restored. Beyond those items, do whatever they want with the building. So then we need another architect to figure out how to do all the other stuff. And then we needed another architect, and that was a design architect. Then we needed an architect to figure out all the technical systems, because nothing of the post office would have been usable heating a restaurant, and it had no cooling, that building. And the lighting, the fluorescent lamps were inappropriate for the new restaurant. So we had a third architect do the technical, mechanical coordination of all the engineers who designed all that stuff. And then they had me coordinating all the architects along with the interior millwork stuff. It took 4 years on site, and it took 4 years before that to get it approved through the town. So the planning board hearings were in 2017, and we opened in mid 2025. So tremendously lengthy project. We started demolition and construction right in the middle of COVID, which you might think would be a kick in the pants, but was actually a godsend, because there was nobody downtown. The entire downtown was deserted, and I could line up 5 dumpsters out on Palmer Square East, and sort out all the different things, the pipe and the metal in one, and the plaster in another, and concrete in another. And actually, we got completely through demolition, a thing that would have been tremendously impactful to downtown and would have generated enormous complaints while nobody was there.
Yeah.
So it didn't really speed things up, but we made it work for us. We got through that, and there was a solid 2 years, 30 months of sort of, let's call it core construction. And then there was about 10 months of fine tuning at the end, of making adjustments, training staff. Hiring staff was tremendously difficult. To hire, 60 to 80 brand new people to work in your restaurant, you just don't put out one ad and have them all show up. So that took a lot of work. So it was, I think, like building and sailing one of those ginormous cruise ships that travels around the Caribbean with tourists from all around the world. It was just every different need you could imagine in the world came to bear upon that project.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive project. And if nothing else, people should stop by just to look at the final product.
Well, they should probably have a beer too.
And maybe get something to eat. Hang out.
No, it's wonderful, and it's very respectful to the town.
Oh, yeah.
The history that everyone remembers about going into the lobby in my case, I mailed my graduate school applications in there. Many of you had your post office boxes in there. Yeah. You went and got your packages by that grumpy guy behind the counter who slammed the gate in your face. I'm closed. All have memories there. All of that's been restored.
Yeah.
Every piece of the woodwork in that lobby is original, except for a few replacement ones, and I challenge you to find them. The entire mural was restored by a high-powered New York City art conservation firm that James Stewart pointed me towards from the museum. They did significant work reattaching it to the wall, a little bit of touching up. It's in a great shape. It's going to last up there another 100 years. So and we improved the lighting in that space. The beautiful chandeliers were original. We just cleaned them, changed the lamps. It's a remarkable room, and you should go in there and just remember your wonderful times being in there years ago.
Well, I think it's hard to sit in there and have an excellent meal, but to not just look around and say, "Oh my gosh, what a difference!"
It also speaks to the quality with which the federal government used to build buildings. They don't seem to do that a whole lot much anymore. It has something to do with low bidder mentality, but it also has to do with the lack of aspiration for greatness in civic design.
Yeah. You mentioned you grew up in Manhattan, so tell us just a little bit about where in Manhattan. What was that like when you grew up there?
Well, I was actually born in Smyrna, Georgia in 1957. Luckily, I was paroled out of the South at the age of 2. And my father, who worked for Shell Oil for 40 years, was transferred from the Atlanta office to the head office in Manhattan in 1959. So, like the Beverly Hillbillies, we came to Manhattan, and we lived on Riverside Drive and 88th Street. And I had candidly what I consider a charmed childhood growing up, playing in Riverside Park in the 1960s, when Manhattan was just a profoundly safe place to be, and people looked out for each other, and little kids could ride the bus, and the bus driver would say, "Hey kid, here's your stop, get off." And it was really wonderful. And then my parents left Manhattan in 1972 as Manhattan started its decline. And they moved to Westfield, New Jersey. But all through the years of their living in Manhattan, they'd always had a summer place and a weekend place in Seagirt, New Jersey. So I'd always had exposure to New Jersey, but Manhattan was the base. But 1972, my parents went to Westfield, and they gave me 2 choices. They said, well, you can go to Westfield High School, or you can keep going to the Trinity School, where I was attending on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I went one day to Westfield High School to check it out as a 10th grader, or beginning, I was late 9th grade. And Mark, 10th grade of Westfield High School was larger than the entire population of Trinity School, to which I'd already attended for 9 years. And I was completely overwhelmed and intimidated. And I said, I think I'll do the commuter thing, and I'll get up and go to Manhattan every day and go to school. So I did that for my last 3 years. And the benefit of that was I spent 3 years commuting on the Central Jersey Railroad from Westfield through Newark into Penn Station, New York. And that taught me right away, I did not want to lead the commuter lifestyle because it's grinding and, you're not in control. Other things are in control. And I saw all these guys in the back car playing cards with their paper sacks, with their beers, getting drunk on their way home. And I thought, ugh, what a miserable life. So luckily I was admitted to Princeton. I came here, but Westfield to Princeton was a 40-minute ride. Back then there was one light from Somerville to Princeton in 514 in Hillsborough. Oh, and 518, there were two lights, excuse me. That was it. I could make it down that strip of road in about 18 minutes. And it was a delight. And so I was lucky to grow up in Manhattan and have all that as a child and get here. And all my colleagues at Princeton, my classmates, they came from Kansas and they wanted to go live in New York. And I came from New York and I'm like, I don't want to go back to New York. It's really going downhill. I want to stay right here in Princeton. And that's what I did.
It's a great story. I think you were involved in theater for a while. What was that all about?
In those days, I wanted to design and build things, but precious few people will let a 17-year-old design and build a building, and that's good. So I did stage design, and I was drawn towards the theater because I could design. My mother was an interior designer. My father was an engineer. So I grew up in a household that built two homes when I was a child, and designing and building is what my grandparents did. My great-grandfather was a power plant builder. One was a bridge builder. And we just don't know much else, candidly. And so stage design was like, no one really wanted to go build the sets. And I thought, oh, I could do that. And all the good-looking girls did theater, and it was a way I could go meet girls. So I signed up for stage design and did a lot of that in high school. And then when I got to Princeton, I just kind of went hog wild. And I did sets at Theater On Team and sets for the Triangle Show in 1977, and worked on a wonderful enterprise Princeton used to have called PJ&B, Princeton Junction and Back, that was directed by Milton Lyon at McCarter, which was a community-based musical that was performed once a year. And then I got to know the people at McCarter, and I ended up painting sets for McCarter all through the late 70s. So I had an extensive period of stage design. But there was a point where I decided I'm kind of tired of having my design thrown in the dumpster after 3 weeks. And I really should get serious about my architecture education. And I knew that was a long road, but that it would pay dividends in the end. And so I got serious about entering the architecture program at Princeton and pivoting away from theater. And, you know, that put me on the journey that I'm still on.
Yeah. Good decision.
But I have to say, working in the theater, I urge any young person who listens to go do that, because there's tremendous ability to learn resources, to work with people, to work with the lighting designer and the director and the costume designer. It's a great collaborative experience, and there's not enough of that in the world where people work together in unison. Too many people read the story of the solitary hero who succeeded by sitting up all night figuring out a new algorithm for this computer program, but true creativity can happen in a room with 8 other people.
Yeah. It's a good lesson to know. So let me just jump back to PDG for a minute. I mean, you're local, but I think you've done projects like in lots of places, not just in Princeton. Is that right?
This is true. When I was young, I would go anywhere to get a job. So I've designed a townhouse in Manhattan, homes in Lake Kissimmee in Florida, pretty much along the East Coast. But now, luckily, 40 years in, I pretty much don't have to leave Princeton, Hopewell, or Montgomery. And that's because I put my crew on the job every morning at 7 a.m. And as the traffic has gotten ridiculous in central New Jersey in the last 40 years, there's only so far I can go if, you know, I hope to keep a good crew, keep them happy, and make some money. So we have a very narrow radius right now. But in the 1990s, I was doing anything I could get up and down the Eastern Seaboard.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, obviously, those I didn't build. So, you know, I was much more flexible in my early model to operate also as a standard architect who just does the drawings and watches someone else build it.
Yeah. Got that. So, out of all these different projects, do you have some favorites that like stick out that you say, oh man, I'm really happy that I was able to do that one?
Without a doubt, the post office. However, there's one underway that's actually slightly more important socially to me than the post office, which is the restoration of Paul Robeson's birthplace on the corner of Witherspoon and Green Street. This is the longest duration of any project we've undertaken. Shirley Satterfield recruited me in 2007 to look at this. She was on the board of Princeton Future when I was on the board of Princeton Future, and she got me involved in the Robeson House project. And it was honestly a crazy pipe dream. A bunch of Shirley and her colleagues from the church, of the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church. Here's something that should be done, we think, but we don't really have any idea how to go about it. So from 2007 until now, 19 years later, we're within 5 or 6 months of actually finishing the completed project. It took 10 years to get an agreement of opinion of the members of the church and the board of the Paul Robeson House of Princeton on what direction to go in. It wasn't really clear in the very beginning. Well, what do you do with this? But do we just keep it as a house? Some people thought that's what we should do. The decision was made to try to pivot, because it's a large building. It's over 3,000 square feet, which as a home in that time in the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood made it amongst one of the larger buildings.
Yeah.
So it had the capacity to take on additional uses. During the middle of the 20th century, Mrs. Gladys Taylor, who owned it at that point, was running as a boarding house with 10 bedrooms. So we collectively came up with this idea of making it partial community center, partial residential, partial gallery that'll tell the history of the neighborhood and the church and the Robeson family combined on the 3 different levels of the building. And we finally were able to start construction, really demolition, in the 2018-19 timeframe. It's been difficult to raise the funds to do this because it's not such an imageable project that you're giving money to cure cancer or create a new wing on the hospital. And candidly, Paul Robeson has been dead 50 years now, and his reputation was besmirched with the communist smear tactics of the House on Un-American activities late in his career, and his passport was withdrawn when he was accused of being a communist sympathizer. So it's been tough to get people interested in the rehabilitation of a building of a man who himself, his reputation has needed to be rehabilitated. But he is a native son to Princeton.
He is, yeah. And it's a great project.
And it became something that we could invest our time and energy. We've donated all of our architectural services, and we're just charging our actual labor cost to do the construction. But because of my early history, my entire family being in the South, and my being present in the South during the beginning of the civil rights era, and watching some of the horrors of the South and its treatment of Black Americans, personally for me, it's a project where I can invest my soul and get some peace out of seeing this building being able to live and tell the story for the next 150 years, long after I'm gone.
Yeah.
So it's really a legacy project for our operation. It's not a beautiful design. It's not something I can point to and say, this is how I want things to look. It's our best conjecture of what we think the building looked like somewhere around the time the Reverend William Drew Robeson Jr. lived in it with his 5 kids. But the building was added on to over 10 times in its 150 years. It's kind of impossible to say what the right look is of the building. But I kind of like that it's not anything of my design imposition. It's more us trying to summon what its history is telling us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice way to do it. So, Kevin, anything else coming up with either PDG or you and all your different community things you do that?
We're about to embark on building a new building for the YWCA at the location of the old Bramwell House on Bayard Lane. And we We have some small things, but I'm always out looking for interesting civic projects. But the Y project I'm going to do with the team that I did the post office with, so it should really be a superlative project.
Yeah. No, it's good to look forward to. Kevin, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Well,
It's been
thank
a
you for
pleasure
inviting
talking
me.
to
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, man. It's
Enjoyed talking with you always.
always good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us for the 70th episode of the Princeton Podcast, produced by the podcast production team at HG Media. If you enjoyed this episode of the Princeton Podcast, please share it with your friends. Visit our website at princetonpodcast.com. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, Audible, or wherever you listen to podcasts.